And I'm Dr. Doug Miller. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a transpersonal psychologist.
And on the Intimacy Hour, we talk about how to work through your relationship challenges and experience growth and healing in relationship. So today we're going to be talking about vulnerability.
Yay.
Why it can be so hard to say how you feel while you're dating and in relationships. And how by learning how to be vulnerable, you can actually get the closeness, healing, and support you've always wanted and needed. So we're going to be answering questions today. We have many questions already submitted to us, so it's going to be a very exciting show. And you can also submit your questions live if you're listening to us right now on Spreaker or Facebook Live. So feel free to just make a comment and let us know what you struggle with and what you want us to address. So
yeah, and we're also going to share some ways that we've been vulnerable with each other and how some of that unfolded in our relationship. And before we get started, Jesse has some announcements to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, welcome to the show again. I missed you guys. I hadn't seen you before.
We missed you too, man.
Yeah, man. It was a struggle. It's like, I don't get to see the Intimacy Hour. But just really quickly, I want to tell all the listeners to go to unitedintentions.org and register. It's free to do so, and you get to link with very like-minded individuals who can help you manifest the reality that you want to create. On top of that, you can also help donate us by going to the How to Help tab on the unitedintentions.org website or webpage on the front end. On top of that, we're gonna unroll something new. We actually have a number that you guys can call. So if you have any questions that you want to be answered live and you have your voice live on our show, you can call us at 470-745-0160. That's 470-745-0160. And either Doug or Elicia can pick up and they can answer your questions. Lastly, I would like to invite you to like us on Facebook at United Intentions, like us on Instagram at United Intentions, follow us on Twitter at Higher Intentions, and subscribe to us on YouTube at United Intentions.
Awesome. Just to let y'all know a little bit about how Elicia and I work. We do sessions with folks, sometimes on Zoom video and sometimes in person. We also do retreats and work with couples. And working with couples, and individuals, we help people really identify pretty quickly what some of their core emotional issues are. And even in traditional therapies, sometimes this really isn't addressed as quickly and gotten right to the point as quickly as we like to. And I think as you hear our show, you'll see how we're dealing with some of the more personal and deeper issues. Now, we're also going to, in this show, address some of the cultural issues that stand in the way of intimacy and vulnerability.
Do you guys get a lot of people who aren't as vulnerable when they come and talk to you guys?
I'd say it's a pandemic in our culture. And yet everyone wants the closeness that vulnerability can bring you.
So it's almost like the path. It's like they don't want to be vulnerable, but if you are vulnerable, you get what you want, essentially.
Right.
See, I'm gonna be paying attention today.
And they can practice being vulnerable in sessions with us. So yeah, we offer our individual and couples sessions, and you can learn more on our websites. My website is Elicia, Elicia, Miller.com.
And my website is DougMillerPhD.com.
All right, so let's talk about our topic today, which is vulnerability.
What is vulnerability? It's being seen for who you really are. It's also exposing your wants and needs and risking asking for what you want and need from the person that you're with.
Without blaming.
Without blaming.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how to do that, and give some examples of expressing yourself and what your true needs are and how you really feel without blaming the other person.
The queen of vulnerability is Brene Brown. She does really great work.
I thought you were going to say Elicia.
Yeah.
She is the queen of core emotional healing
Okay.
and of my heart.
Oh, there you go. Should have added an applause right there.
Yay!
Yay.
So Brene Brown's work, I can't speak highly enough about it. If you get a chance, look her up and watch some of her videos or read some of her books. She defines vulnerability as, quote, uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. She says also to feel is to be vulnerable. And we'll talk more about how emotions are not dealt with in our culture and why feeling is so associated with vulnerability. She makes another statement that vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. So when you're coming from your vulnerability, there's actually an empowerment that happens of speaking truth. And what I've noticed is when people are coming from their vulnerability in a very clear way, it's like it kind of earns and immediately kind of receives this respect because it is such a truthful thing. And a lot of what we're talking about with vulnerability is courage. So that's why she says, it's truth and courage are involved in vulnerability. Another quote is, love is filled with uncertainties and risks.
And we'll add to that these risks and taking these risks, and the reason why it's so hard to speak really about how you feel is because it evokes personal wounds typically from childhood around love, and including with our parents. And so we get triggered of what if the person won't love me and reject me and abandon me, and so all of that happens typically subconsciously. And so that's why I want to bring awareness to what could be evoking it, and we can explore that more and give examples.
Yeah, the inherent riskiness of vulnerability already puts you in a place where you're exposing some of the things that you're most afraid of from the wounds from your childhood. Probably my favorite quote of Brene Brown's on vulnerability is her statement about daring greatly. She says, without question, putting ourselves out there means a far greater risk of feeling hurt. But as I look back on my life and what daring greatly has meant to me, I can honestly say that nothing is as uncomfortable, dangerous, and hurtful as believing that I'm standing on the outside of my life, looking in and wondering what it would be like if I had the courage to show up and let myself be seen. And in our relationship, one of my early experiences, probably through the first 8 months to a year, Elicia doesn't know I was going to say this, but
I know what you're going to say.
I would, I might be hugging her, or and then I'd feel part of myself kind of pull away or not be fully present, or I'd be speaking with her, and I had to repeatedly say to myself, step into this. And, to some extent, that's been an episodic mantra for my life. And these lives are rare gifts. And in terms of vulnerability, it's about risking your heart and about having the courage, again, to step into the intimacy that you want. And, again, also, that involves pushing through some of the fears that may have come from past relationships.
And protections.
Right on.
So, yeah, I know a lot of people that I work with, think because they're afraid to be themselves, and then they see the missed opportunities. Like, if only I said that to that person, maybe they would know me. And so I just had that image when you shared that quote of like looking on the outside of like, like I'm not fully engaged with other people right now with showing who I am. So yeah, it's definitely important, and the key to intimacy and actually getting what we've always wanted. And as Doug said, it does take risk and courage and pushing through those fears and resistance. So what we see is it's definitely a two-way street. That takes a lot of acceptance on both partners and courage, and and to be in an open not open relationship.
an honest
relationship.
And if you're in an open relationship, to be honest, that's
about the open
how
relationship.
those work. That's the only way those really
I know,
work.
right? Like, I was in an open relationship. I don't know what you were thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another issue. We got some questions already about dating, and I want to introduce this idea of what I call the intimacy curve. And the intimacy curve is how fast do you go in being intimate with someone? I really feel that some of our intimacy unfolded over a few years. I don't feel like there's a whole much kind of vulnerability. The vulnerability unfolded over a few years.
It still is.
Yeah. And, I think we're there's not a whole lot left, but there
we
is
don't
more.
know.
Yeah, you really don't. And I think that's part of the excitement of a relationship. But, in how fast do you get vulnerable with someone? That's the question. And, of course, on a first date, you don't want to spill all your guts. That's kind of not taking care of yourself. And so vulnerability embraces boundaries and trust, like having boundaries around around your vulnerability, and waiting till you can trust the person enough to share your more vulnerable things that you want to share. And we'll talk more about that. We got some great questions along those lines. And one last quote from Brene Brown. Vulnerability is about sharing our feelings and our experiences with people who have earned the right to hear them.
Yes, and that brings up a very important aspect of when, or actually indication of when to be vulnerable is when you feel safe with the person. So what we're presenting is a way for you to see how valuable being vulnerable is, but to know and discern who to be vulnerable with. And so when you feel safe with someone that you can share, and they can hear you, and they don't make you wrong or shut you down, then you know that that's a safe person. And safety builds over time as well. So safety and trust. And so that's, we also see that it's easier to be vulnerable when you have built that internal safety as well. So when you feel safe sharing about yourself, because there's not so many risks of being rejected, because you have already built up that strong sense of self-esteem, and where love and acceptance comes from within you. So then you're not risking, being rejected. It's okay if you're rejected, because you're okay no matter what. So those are two things of building that internal safety, and then knowing who's safe to be vulnerable with.
Awesome. And that brings us to our first question.
Okay, so the question is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on vulnerability while dating. It's such a tricky thing. There have been a couple of people that have come and gone, and I feel like they've never gotten to know the real me. It's like I'm waiting for proof before I let my guard down. But then when it ends, I imagine a completely different experience and possible outcome. If I would have just been free, it may have been for the best, but it still gets me in my head about how to act in that early stage.
And I just want to set that up a little more. I know you have some wonderful things to say. You're almost sort of giving an example of Brene Brown's quote above about really stepping into things, as opposed to feeling some regret that you haven't. And with that kind of summary,
so my advice in dating is to be as honest as possible, not so much about your past right away, but being honest about how you feel in the moment, and just checking in with the other person in different ways. So an example of that would be if you have limited time because you just got divorced, you're single mom, you're an entrepreneur, and you have this little limited time. You could be honest about the time that you have available, and so the other person knows it's not them, and they don't feel rejected because you don't have time for them. So that's an example of being honest in the present moment of what, where you are, and then checking in with the other person about, in reverse, if you have a lot of time available and you have a need to be with them a lot, you could check in about their availability so you can adjust your needs and expectations to how much they can give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, intimacy and vulnerability really involves two people, mm-hmm. and you want to move at the same pace and kind of check in with each other. I think that's okay to do. And what Elicia's describing is a person who's being authentic and genuine right off the bat. And that doesn't mean revealing everything or the wounds or all the deepest vulnerabilities, but it means being very honest. And I doubt if anyone out there really wants to have someone who's not like that. And if you meet someone who's genuine and honest, that's going to be a very appealing person to you. And when you behave that way, it becomes an invitation for the person that you're with to also be very genuine and honest and authentic. And that's the start of a really great relationship.
Yeah, I'll give you another example of being honest right away is sharing how you feel about that person. Like, I really love your smile, and it mm-hmm. like lights me up. Mm-hmm. And that's a clear communication that you are into them. And then that person can read the situation better. And mm-hmm. so we're not about playing games or holding back.
Yeah.
There's actually a Facebook
comment.
There's a Facebook comment actually from LaShawn Williams, and she says, "I used to put guys in the friend zone if I felt too vulnerable as to not get close enough to get hurt."
Yeah, and just like this question, that comes from previous wounds and fear of being hurt. And again, what opportunities are you cutting yourself off from? And this kind of issue of whether you can trust men, and when men can trust whether men can trust women, and all that comes into play. And I think the overall we all err on the side of not being vulnerable enough and not opening up enough. And that's what I hear in that question. And we're going to talk more about some ways to move through that. But that's a great question.
Is there such thing as being too vulnerable?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's about...
At first.
Oh, okay.
Until you build that trust and safety, as we were sharing in the beginning. So if you just come all out with your entire life story, and then it's like... Whoa, or if you're like, I want to get married now and have kids with you.
Yeah.
One of the things for LaShawn and others is to be very clear about what you want in a partner and to even make a list. And we've talked about that in past shows, like not just the characteristics in that person, but also do you want them to be physically demonstrative? How much time do you want to spend with them? Do you want them to focus a lot on emotions or do this or that? And once you know that, when you meet a person, you're much clearer if this person is really the person that you want. And on the other side of that equation is, are you being the person that you want to be when you're actually in a close relationship? And again, that goes to that authenticity and that genuineness and honesty right off the bat. And to evoke that in the other person and to even see if the person can meet you there at a reasonable pace. Yeah,
and I want to add to the list, if you want to talk quickly about attachment styles.
Yeah,
because
sure.
This is really important to know what your attachment style is. So there's secure, insecure, or
avoidant.
Avoidant.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who insecure wants a lot of closeness, so it's also called anxious. So that person, and Doug and I are that type where we love being close and we love a lot of closeness. The avoidant type wants a lot of distance, and that they feel better with more space and time apart.
Yeah.
Secure is just secure in themselves, and whatever,
Yeah.
it works for them.
Kind of in the middle.
Yeah. So it's good to know what your attachment style is and what you need and what you desire. Because if you want closeness and the person needs more space, you may want to question if that's ever, going to give you what you need.
Yeah, and to find that out, you can ask them and ask yourself, how much time did I want to spend with this person? How, through a day, through a week, etc. And we have actually another question on dating.
Would you want to?
You want to take a break? Or?
We can if you guys like. We still have some time left. So.
Okay.
Let's keep going on to the other question.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the other question is, I long to return to a more innocent place of expression from my feelings, passion, and warmth, rather than calculated game playing and measuring tit for tat. When I watch dating experts, I feel conflicted. Have we gotten so low on self-esteem and fearful of connection that we need to measure our behavior so much? I get inspired and helped to a degree with the stepping back and allowing the man to come forward and not push too much, as I have often been told I do, but then can't help thinking that the man for me would see through to the real me and love me for my wanting to connect deeply and passionately quite too soon in.
I really love the first sentence in this about feelings, passion, warmth rather than calculated game playing. The games and measuring tit for tat are ways to protect ourselves. You mentioned self-esteem and being fearful of connection. I also think that's right on. When you're talking about self-esteem, if your self-esteem is low and you begin to reveal yourself to another person, then you're going to start feeling ashamed and put up some defenses, and it's going to be very difficult to be vulnerable because you're afraid that what's exposed is going to be unacceptable. Did you want to say anything about that first part?
No, I was just going to move on to the next
Move
part.
on.
So so the feedback of pushing too much, it doesn't mean that you may be pushing too much, but maybe that person was a avoidant, type of person where it feels pushing too much because you want more closeness. But that feeling of pushing, if you could just drop back and more about honoring each other, of honoring each other's space. So, hey, I'd love to hang out with you this week or as much as possible. What's your availability? And then honor that person's availability, and then check in to see if they may not be so available for you, and then evaluate it.
I think most people have had an experience of meeting someone and spending a little time with them, and then like moving really fast and maybe freaking the other person out. And so if that's a tendency of yours, then maybe you want to kind of err more on just going a little slower, feeling things out. Be patient with yourself too. See if this person's really right for you. So that the vulnerability curve should just slow down a little bit and have a little more gradual slope.
I want to add something to that about I love what you said about make sure this person is right for you. I find a lot of people are like looking at the person as rejecting them instead of being in the a power place of saying, is this person available to me? Can they give me what I need? And that's your choice.
And that's where that list can really make things very, very clear very fast, because you have your list and you're talking to someone, you're like, oh, there's that, there's that, there's that. Oh, but they don't have this. Well, that's not a deal breaker. I'm going to hang in there, get to know this person. Or maybe there's a few things that you find, and it's a deal breaker. Then you know that you need to take care of yourself, because you're never going to get those things that are really important.
And maybe the top one on your list then would be to know and feel that the person desires you. If that's what's been missing. And I know that was on my list, and that was obvious for me, and that was my yes for us, was that it was very obvious, and that's what I've always wanted, of someone that was yes. I say yes to you.
Yeah.
You want a yes, man.
I am saying yes to you.
Yeah. I said that to you, right?
I love it. Are we?
We could definitely take a break if you guys feel like it. That's in the cards. Matter of fact, I've actually been enjoying your conversation about vulnerability, and hopefully there's more questions. And our Facebook is getting pretty active, so there might be some more questions for you there.
Love it.
And just to remember all our audience that you can call in at 470-745-0116. That's 470-745-0160. You can call in and ask Doug and Elicia your questions, and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Maria Sullivan, and welcome to The Silver Lining, a show about overcoming anything life throws at you and seeing the blessings from within. I've dealt with people from all walks of life, people who have believed there was no way out or have given up on life. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is always a silver lining if you know where and how to look for it. Join me on the United Intentions Network and on Spreaker at United Intentions as we discuss the unfortunate situations in life and learn how others have found their power from within. Hear how they've transformed their world and the world around them for the better. I invite you to listen in, and I hope to see you there.
All right, welcome back.
Yeah, it sounds like a great show.
It really is. She's coming on next week.
Yeah.
And she's talking to someone who helps women who have been on the streets and beaten and were like sold to sex traffickers and stuff.
Wow.
So
that's a really important show.
Yeah, she touches those heavy subjects.
Wow.
And I think there needs to be more awareness about that, because everyone likes to put the blind eye like, oh, that doesn't happen, but yes, it does.
Definitely.
Yeah,
tune in.
Yeah, a good friend of mine's getting involved in that pretty heavily too.
Man, yeah, we should definitely connect with him too.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd love it. Yeah.
Well, welcome back. This is Elicia
and Doug Miller,
and we're this is the Intimacy Hour. We're talking about vulnerability.
Yeah, and we're gonna turn to cultural conditioning, and when I just want to put a few kind of disclaimers in there. When we're talking about cultural conditioning, we're really talking.
Hello.
Hi.
Can I get on the air? This is Debbie Unterman.
Hey,
Hi, Debbie.
Hey.
You're on air.
Oh, I am on air. I'm not hearing myself on. Okay, I better turn down my sound. Hi.
Hey.
Okay.
Good to hear your voice.
You too. Mm-hmm. You too. I found out you were on today when I got a call from Jesse. So I was excited. Yeah. So I have a couple questions, but I think I'll keep it personal. One was going to be about a client of mine, but I thought maybe because we're doing vulnerability right now, I will be vulnerable and talk about my relationship.
Yeah, we're going to do it in a little while, so I'm glad you're going first.
Okay. So this is going to get into politics, and I don't know if you want to touch that, but it's touching me. So I have a new boyfriend that you know where I live, and you know my apartment. Well, this guy moved in on the catwalk next door, my very next door neighbor, and he lived there for 2.5 years taking care of his mother. We became friends. He'd come over and we'd eat dinner and watch Braves games, and after she died, we got together. So it's been over a year now. It's a very good relationship that started as friends, but we have the political difference going on, and I feel that that's the one place where I have to kind of, pull it in. And I'm usually so open and honest and talk about everything, but we really, the only way we can stay together is by not talking about politics. And I wonder, can it survive, for one thing?
Well, let me ask in regard to today's show, do you feel that it interferes with your vulnerability and intimacy with this gentleman?
No, as long as we just don't go there. We'll sometimes joke about it, like he'll say, I'll make a Republican out of you, one of these days, and I'm like, no, you won't. And, I can't bring up the things that I would want to talk about and the current events, because we just would fight. Well, so other than that, everything's good.
Yeah, your heart and gut are in this relationship?
Yeah, the heart is good, but it makes, this is like the politics makes me wonder, how can a person who would, follow a person who would be so mean be a good person? It's like it gets me kind of twisted.
Yeah. So speaking of vulnerability, have you been vulnerable with him about this conflict that you're having? Within
yeah.
conflict yeah.
Yeah, because we were together the night of the election. And, I was quite confident it was going to turn out one way when I got back from working the polls.
Have you been talking to him about it since then, of how this is hard?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's the talking about it that doesn't work. And if we don't talk about it, it's that elephant in the room, but we get along great.
Well, it sounds like you're in this relationship right now, at least, and you two are moving forward with these different political views, and there'll either be adaptations around those things and an understanding reached, which that could be incredibly growthful for both of you. You kind of represent the country in that sense.
As long as you can respect each other without...
I know, and I do feel that, Doug. I actually feel like, oh my God, we can be an example of bringing the polarities together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and or we'll go the other way, but right now it sounds like you're pretty solid, So
yeah. Talk about acceptance. Right?
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It's often the tensions, the differences in relationships that add the energy. And David Data talks a lot about the polarity of male and female, but also, in my experience, it's the way people are different and can learn and kind of have some tension created and grow that can really add some energy to a relationship.
Yeah.
Whether that that'll I don't know about hopefully, but maybe that'll go that way for you if that's what
I hope so. I mean, the old adage that opposites attract has kind of been debunked as far as relationships. They say really like attracts like, do make better relationships.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it depends on forget about the party or the person that he voted for. Like, what are his values, and are they aligned with yours? And what is his...
That's what I wonder about. Basically, there's so many things that we're right on the same page about. The compatibility is great. But it's the values, Elicia. You're right.
And that could be something to talk about.
It makes me wonder.
Yeah. Well,
see, we're so connected that he has just called me right now, and I know for sure that he is not listening to this radio station.
Well,
that's how connected we are.
We got a radio show to do, and it sounds like you have a lover to take care of. So we're going to move on.
All
Thanks
right.
for calling, Debbie.
Thanks. It's great to hear from you, Debbie.
Yeah.
Thanks. Great show. Bye.
Yep, bye.
Take care. Okay, speaking of culture and cultural differences, so as I was introducing, cultural conditioning and sort of the traditional ways that men and women overall get conditioned, and there's always exceptions, and we're kind of speaking about the kind of typical way that men and women are conditioned, and there are some patterns that emerge in relationships and for people in terms of how they deal with their vulnerability or don't deal with their vulnerability based on their gender. And the level beyond that is then the personal level. But right now, Elicia and I are going to talk about the cultural level, and she's going to start with women, and I'm going to start with men.
So for women, it's been our feelings. We're generally more in tune with how we feel and expressive of our emotions. In general, we can be more emotional, which doesn't mean that we're being vulnerable. The reason why it's hard to be vulnerable, which means speaking for what we need and how we really feel, I think being emotional could mean being blaming and upset about how things are going, versus speaking from that vulnerable place. So the reason why it's hard for women in general, this also goes to men, but it's more of a feminine trait that also can be in men. But for women, culturally, we have been shamed for our emotions in a different way than men, but oftentimes saying that we're too sensitive or dramatic and too emotional, just relax, get over it, don't feel that way.
It's because it's true. I'm playing. I'm kidding.
We're going to have a talk later, Jesse.
Well,
and
I just want to say those comments coming from men and sometimes women are because of the man's, own discomfort with his emotions.
Yeah.
And so there becomes this kind of shadow projection, whereas if a woman's emotional, and this happened in the historically, where emotionality and even intuition were relegated to women, and had kind of a darkness around them.
Yeah. Well, so the reason why women were so emotional is this reason, because their feelings were ignored, or shut down or shamed or made wrong. So then that will come out eventually into that kind of like dramatic hysteria of like these triggers come out of like, oh my God, you're doing this to me. And it comes from having no like sense of actually what's going on. And so it's the shutdown of their own emotional needs. And so for women, how they respond to that is to take care of other people's emotions. So that's where the codependent pattern forms of this person, no one's here for me, so I'll just give up my needs, and then I'll be there for them to make sure they feel okay and make sure they're happy. And that tends to happen as children, of making sure the parents are okay, and then it extends out for the rest of their life until they do the inner child and core emotional healing work.
Yeah, and I'm seeing this kind of deeper personal feminism movement occurring, where women are really getting hep to that pattern more than ever. That they're tired of carrying kind of the emotional load for men, and this is where some of my work comes in with men, which I'll talk about later. But
well, do you want to talk about how men's vulnerability was affected and the different reaction? So women gave up their needs, and then men. And
men, I often say men literally had our vulnerability and emotionality beaten out of us, sometimes on the playground or by older siblings. But even from right after birth, it's a fact that in our culture that male babies are coddled and held less than girl babies. And then the conditioning into masculinity includes much more. And of course, we're all familiar with there's so much of this going around now, but the idea that you have to man up or don't be a sissy, don't be a crybaby, all the things that these messages to boys on the playground, and then that they're just implicit and throughout our culture. So there's a basic shame. And Elicia, when you were even talking about like women becoming dramatic and emotional, at least there's a deeper level of shaming about emotion for sure, and a personal level, but men don't even have that permission to even mishandle their emotions.
Only to get angry. So that's their drama.
Anger, right on. Yeah, absolutely. Put everything into anger. That's the new kind of acceptable way to be emotional as a man. So in essence, remember Brene Brown's quote that all feeling involves vulnerability. Well, because men aren't allowed to express their feelings particularly in a vulnerable way, then we're not allowed to be vulnerable. Then we lose touch with our authentic, deeper needs, and we'll talk more about that. Did you want to go into more female dynamics? Since men are often baffling creatures to women and ourselves, I have a men's group on Facebook and that I manage, and in general, guys try to be express their vulnerability and talk about emotional issues and other just anything that affects guys and and it's all men. There's no women in the group. There's about 265 men right now in this group. And about 8-9 months ago, this one guy came in who was like a real macho, traditional type guy. And without saying too much, because I really ended up really respecting this guy, and you'll see why. But the way he came into the group, we were talking about vulnerability because it's one of the cornerstones for me about masculine healing and about men coming into their actual power internally, not externally. More about that if you ever want to know. So he came into the group saying there's nothing wrong with shrugging off things people do to you. So isn't this like the classic, in commentary, just like a blow off of like how things are affecting you? Just shrug it off. I mean, most guys have heard that. And my response was that there's a big difference between healing and owning your feelings and shrugging them off. And I think this pattern of men not being allowed to feel all of their feelings contributes to abusiveness, lack of intimacy, poor emotional control, and a lot of other problems. So he then defined vulnerability in this way, and I just think this captures something so important about the traditional masculine mentality, saying that vulnerability is, and it was kind of like a dictionary, one of the dictionary's definitions, and it's the quality of being easily hurt or attacked. And then he suggested that the men in the group were celebrating being easily hurt and attacked. And he said, yeah, we've all been hurt. So what? Do you want to be more vulnerable? Why? And so I sent him the article that I just quoted from Brene Brown on vulnerability. And to his credit, and this was just so great to hear him say, he said, in that article, vulnerability is not the traditional dictionary definition of vulnerability. What they are describing in the article is warrior, unfearing, knowing your weakness, and how to protect and work with it. This is strength. This is willingness to know your personality and accept it. It's knowing you didn't create this personality. It's what life handed you, and now what are you going to do with it? And it was such a powerful statement, and I let him know that he really understands the actual courage that's involved. And frankly, I don't think this guy needed to hear it from me, but I just, after what we'd been through, it was really nice sharing that commonality. And yeah, even like, the difficulty and warrior nature of getting to really know yourself. In a lot of the work we do, some of that energy, some of that warrior, that persistence, that real desire to want to heal through difficult emotions is really needed. And
to explore. So to see what is hard for you. Why is it so hard for me to tell my partner the truth? Like, why can't I just tell him what I really want? And to be curious about that instead of letting that create more of these difficult patterns that happen in your relationship, to be curious of why can't I say this? What's going on? And so being kind of secretive to yourself and your partner, it can come from being afraid of getting in trouble as a child or being shamed.
Or abandoned for having emotions because you were emotionally.
And maybe even in past relationships. You may have been in more of an abusive relationship where they did shame you for having any needs and asking for what you wanted. So,
and again, that's where the courage comes from, is willing to go back into and seek that love, not to back away out of the fear of the past.
Yeah. Well, let's be vulnerable and give an example of our relationship and when we had some difficult interactions, and I learned to be vulnerable and actually got what I needed, which healed my personal wounds and helped us really get really close and feel safe in our relationship in the beginning.
Yeah, we talked about that in a previous show about when you find someone that you can be vulnerable with and really work things through, it can become really powerfully healing. And that's some of the work. That's one of the things that we teach couples to do with each other. And it's extremely powerful and effective, efficient work in terms of living a more fulfilled life and healing.
So you want to share about our
How
experience?
about we share after the break?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, because it was my turn to share.
I am so sorry. So we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You are in tune with United Intentions on the Intimacy Hour.
You are listening to The Good Intentions Show, sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation and UnitedIntentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions, one intention at a time.
And we're back.
I think that plinky, plinky, plinky
Right.
puts me in a vulnerable mode. I just want to, like...
You just feel like telling it all now.
I do. I just want to open up.
So don't you want to tell everyone about what we went through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I will. Interesting, because as part of my cultural conditioning, I remember the men in my life, looking at porn magazines and checking women out, like, just aggressively on the street. And of course, a lot of that still goes on. So, we're not talking about just old traditional things that used to happen. These things still do. Then I was involved with many, my previous girlfriends kind of had an attitude of like, look, but don't touch, or it never became an issue. And I've actually had felt some shame about that, because when I talk to this about other men, they're like, what are you, like a Neanderthal, or what are you doing? So
So in our relationship,
then came Elicia, who felt very differently and was very clear about it, coming from a place of power and authenticity, really, about this.
Yeah. So in the beginning of our relationship, I noticed Doug checking out other women, and it hit me so strongly for multiple reasons. As first of all, I finally found the love I always wanted, and then that person is actually checking out other women, which confused me, and it also hurt me because no other man in relationships did that. So it was the first time that was presented to me, and my reaction, because I had grown out of my own objectification. I also came from a conditioning of experiencing women being objectified, and I was objectified, and that's how I was seeking love, and I healed from that. And so I really wanted true love, and to be loved for who I am and not my body and how I look. So for him to objectify other women and to be with the person I loved, I was like, what? So it like really triggered me, and it triggered my anger, and my reaction was to say, no, what are you doing? You don't do that.
Yeah.
Da, da, da. And I came from this hurt place.
And hurt and pain often turned into blame and shame, and I felt very ashamed, but I was like engaged in the anger and defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And that's a common pattern.
Right. So as soon as I got angry, he would defend.
Good times.
Yep, I know. And the defense was like, well, no other woman, every other woman.
Right.
So I was like, well, who cares about every other woman? So then I finally, one day, it happened, I sat with my feelings. And then I turned to Doug and I said, when you check out other women, I don't feel safe in our relationship.
And man, that's not okay with me. Mm-hmm. Or woman, that's not okay with me. And it made me really think, like, I certainly didn't want to hurt her. Like, I think I had begun reining in that thing, but it wasn't authentic yet. And once I knew I was hurting her, really, put me on myself and made me. And then I started thinking, like, this kind of obvious questions, like, what the hell am I getting out of that anyway? You know, and like the answer was like pretty much nothing, or it might have been like some narcissistic, or I don't even know, but it certainly was like of no value compared to hurting someone I love, you know, and hurting Elicia. So then, like, that behavior is like really pretty much gone. I mean, if like there's like an attractive woman, it might be like, you know, okay, and
and it doesn't bother me.
And it feels really
now.
great. Like, I feel
know.
more empowered in that way, and I feel like our relationship is stronger because of it. But again, the main thing that shifted that was Elicia having the courage to be vulnerable about what hurt her so much. Mm-hmm. And then the two-way street that we've talked about, that vulnerability has to occur in the context of love. And maybe we got to a point where she knew that I loved her enough that she could do that, was me responding appropriately, me taking a look inside. So it's both partners. When these issues come up, both partners have to look inside and see what their reactions are and why.
Mm-hmm. So are there any, we have lots of things to cover. We can even, continue next show.
That's amazing. No, for right now, for social media, maybe we just have some likes and some comments and some love, so that's good.
Okay. We have there's another question. We have more vulnerability, but we can get to that. The question's more important.
We have lots of examples of our life, but we do have a question.
We've had a lot of problems,
which is why
we've had all kinds of problems. We could talk about it all day.
Which is why we are experts.
So you want me to read this one?
Do you want this last one that came in? Because we have time for just one more.
I thought this was great.
Okay. Okay.
When did that come in?
This was the last one I read you.
Yeah, okay. Here's a question from a woman. How to ask for what you want and need. I have real difficulty asking for these. Even though now I do have someone, I feel less afraid to ask.
This was the clarification. Let me read this one.
Okay. So that's the introduction, and that's that's good. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, how to
we
say...
asked for clarification, and here's the details.
Yeah. So, like, how to say how you feel to someone in a way that isn't confrontational or blaming them, or how to ask for someone's attention, again, without being demanding, being clear about what you want and need. Also, what if someone does not give you a good response? How to negotiate that? Do you have time to talk to me for a few minutes? No, sorry. What to do then? Hope that makes sense. Seems so small to these interactions, but it's in every interaction that builds a way of relating. So
first off, this whole question, and this person had experienced, some pain in relationships in the past.
Well, going back to childhood, so
okay. Let me when you don't get and I teach this to the people I work with. This is again where the courage comes up. Your comment about when you don't get the response you want. Men can run into battle and shoot each other and dodge bullets and fight but asking for what you want takes so much courage sometimes. And then when the person doesn't give it to you or doesn't give you the response that you want, it takes so much courage to receive that and then ask again or to ask in a new way. And this happens in relationships. In relationships, both people might be stressed or tired. One person's distracted. One person feels vulnerable and asks for something, and it isn't always forthcoming. And so, in a sense, their partner didn't provide them what they asked for. Again, it takes courage to come back from a calm and clear place and not a blaming or angry place. Mm-hmm. Did you want to follow up at all? Or?
Well, so that example, do you have time to talk to me for a few minutes? No, sorry. Then I hear that it wasn't the response that she wanted, and so the next question then would be, when do you have time, or can you touch base with me when you're free? instead of why aren't you available to me? So that would be a blaming, like
Right.
you're never there for me, you don't care about me, you know.
And that response, that type of response, you're never there for me, you blame, there's often that kind of hyperbole. You never, or you always, or the anger itself is indicating that there's a trigger there. And these kinds of responses, often what's in the background is a fear of being abandoned and of people not being there for you. Because in essence, they're leaving you alone. You ask for something, they don't give it to you. It's an abandonment. They're abandoning your emotions, and
That's what it feels like.
right.
But it's not an abandonment. The person's not available. So they're actually not abandoning you. They're not saying, I don't want to be with you. They're actually saying, I don't have time right now.
And I was saying in the moment.
Yeah, it feels like that.
It feels like that.
Yeah.
So, what can really help with that, and on the last show we said your triggers are a gift, is to start exploring the source of all those feelings. And once that gets healed sufficiently, in that same situation, you can hold the quote rejection or the lack of immediate satisfaction and ask in the way that Elicia said, or bring it up at a later time. I wish you were there for me, and start talking it through. And once you do that, you're in full, vulnerability and intimacy, and unless you're with someone who's really has a lot to work on, you're going to get some kind of positive response and ability. And if you run into the same thing even after doing this again and again, then that's really when you want to call us or another professional and get help around those issues.
Yeah, I like what you said. It can go from feeling like rejection to just unavailable at that moment.
Yeah.
And if it keeps coming up that you feel rejected, that's definitely your cue to go back and be with that part of you who felt abandoned, and honor how you felt and give yourself what you need and be there for yourself by listening to what you need in the moment. Like your emotional needs in the moment would be to say it's okay, like this person is busy, it's not about you, it's not about me,
And that is when you feel, in my experience in going through many of these kinds of processes, when you reach that level of kind of equanimity and calmness in those situations and can maintain it, like it feels very adult and very empowered, and also very respectful of the partner. And I would go into anger, or you might go into blame, and both of those states are very disempowered and weak states in relationship. Whereas the calmness and the ability to endure not getting what you want and not responding from an old pain puts you in a solid, empowered place.
And in that place, when you're able to do that, you're also able to be there if someone is angry or upset or blaming, and not take it personal, and actually see they're stressed out. That just happened this morning with me. I was really stressed out for many different reasons, and I got really upset with Doug, and he wasn't doing anything. It was just my own stress. And Doug, we're able to hold that space for each other and honor where each other are and see, okay, they're really stressed out. It's not about me. And
she came back pretty soon after and then apologized and gave me a kiss, and it was like, yay, this is working.
Yay!
And on that note.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, this has been a fantastic episode, but we are running out of time.
Yes, well, we feel complete today, and we'd love to hear from everyone. If you have any questions on vulnerability or anything else, our next show is September 14th, so just in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you can submit those questions through contact@unitedintentions.org.
Mm-hmm. And every time that they're on live on Facebook Live, you can also ask your questions and put comments in there, as well as on our Spreaker radio stream. On top of that, we have just like how you listen today, we have a new system where you can ask for questions as well. You can actually call us at 470-745-0160. That's 470-745-0160, where you can ask questions, and just like how you guys eloquently did today, you can get your questions answered live on the air. So without further ado, do you guys have any closing comments?
Be excellent to each other.
Party on.
Party on. All right. Thank you for tuning in.